The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you. I always like to fill the room with suspense. And thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And I will be splitting my time with the honourable member for Calgary-Mindapore. After 8 years, we've had an opportunity to assess the results of the latest grand experiment. We know the experiment we're always told we need to conduct. The experiment is that socialist parties come along and tell voters that life's not fair, that there's too much greed, and the solution to greed is for government to get big and powerful, take the people's money, and spread it around in a way that's fair, so everybody gets their rightful due. Now, of course, the question is who actually gets to carve up the spoils and decide who gets what? Well, the answer, of course, is government itself, and government makes its decision based on politics. Of course, politics is based on, unfortunately, influence, and those with influence tend to be those with money. And as a result, those with money can convert that money into political power, and that power back into yet more money, and that money back into more political power, and the cycle goes and goes and goes. And so while the promise was that the government would get grand and powerful and take from the rich to give to the middle class and those working hard to join them, remember those people? We don't hear about them very much anymore after 8 years. In fact, in practice, the game is played very differently. Let's talk about the question, the very simple question of public finance. From whom to whom? So from whom has the money come, and to whom is it going? Let's start about from whom. The money is coming from the working class people of this country who are under a siege not seen in at least 40 years. Inflation has reached a 40-year high as the cost of government has bid up the cost of living. $500 billion of inflationary deficits have increased the cost of the goods we buy and the interest we pay. So the real human impact of this highly predictable economic phenomenon is that 67% of Canadians now agree that everything feels broken in Canada. We have 9 of 10 young people who don't own homes say they never will. We have students now, according to media reports, living in homeless shelters while they study. We have 1.5 million people eating at a food bank in a single year, some of whom asking food bank presidents for help with suicide, with medical assistance in dying, not because they're sick, but because the poverty that they experience after 8 years of this Prime Minister is so insufferable that they would rather end their misery altogether. We have mortgage payments. The average mortgage payment has doubled from $1,500 to over $3,200. The average rent payment in our 10 biggest metropolitan centres has doubled as well. So the people, by the way, food prices are up 12%, energy prices have off and on experienced inflation of at times 100% year over year. And by the way, these are the commodities that make up a much larger part of the budgets of the low-income and working-class people. So and the answer to the question of from whom is, of course, Canada's working-class people, the people who get out of bed every day, who do the nation's labor. They are the ones who are paying the bills for this experiment. So the second part of the question is, to whom? Who's getting all this benefit? Because I think when we look around our communities, we don't see a lot of people putting up their hand and saying, boy, I sure have received a windfall. I don't know how many constituents of the members in this chamber here today are getting $1,500 an hour contracts from this government. No, zero. We're talking about a very small group of people who are getting these benefits. And who are they? Well, let's start chronologically. Let's go back. Let's start with SNC-Lavalin, right? This is a perfect example of the experiment of which I speak. They went to a socialist country called Libya. Libya, the word socialist is actually in the republic's name. And so you would think they'd want nothing to do with a multinational. Well, of course, that multinational bought influence and stole over $100 million from the poorest people in Africa. Now, the Prime Minister was not going to let a company like that face criminal charges, so he actually fired his Attorney General because she refused to have those charges dropped. So we see the Prime Minister protecting a corporation that had stolen from Africa's poorest people, a corporation that of amongst the most privileged people on planet Earth. After that, we saw the Prime Minister give grants, multi-million-dollar grants to Loblaw to pay for fridges, to credit card companies, highly profitable credit card companies, to provide them with corporate subsidies. Recently, his finance minister was confronted about the plan in the budget to fund $2 billion to a company that does not exist. And the finance minister, when she heard that allegation, said that is absolutely false. It's not $2 billion, it's $15 billion. But we can imagine who's going to benefit from that. And now, McKinsey. Now, the Prime Minister gave a glowing speech about his non-friend friend, the non-friend he likes to hug, Dominic Barton, who said that he had hired Mr. Barton for $1 a year. Somehow $1 became $50 million, and then it became $100 million, and then it was $120 million. And because the price tags keeps rising, I actually asked the Prime Minister now, close to a dozen times in the House of Commons, what is the total dollar value of all the contracts the Prime Minister has paid this company after 8 years, and he still can't answer the question. But we know that they're making a lot of money, and according to the government departments that hired them, in many cases did no work of any value. And so the public servants who could have done the job themselves say this company came in with a bunch of fancy charts and graphs and the latest MBA-isms and made off with millions, and no one can actually figure out what they did for the money. That's to whom the money is going. In fact, this government has increased the budget for high-priced consultants by nearly 100% to over $15 billion. For context, we have 15 million families in Canada. So that means each family is spending $1,000 in federal taxes for high-priced consultants. That's to whom your money is going. So if you are sitting at home wondering why your paycheck evaporates in federal taxes and asking where it all goes, well, that is one answer to the question. Now, should we be surprised that these are the people that are getting all the money? Well, wouldn't you expect it? This is the circle this government travels in. These are the friends that they hang out with at Davos. And none of my members went to Davos.
That's right.
We're not going to Davos. We stayed in our communities while the meeting in Davos was happening recently. We work for our people on the ground, the common people. This is the House of Commons, and the common people deserve to have a voice. You know, and so we learn the lesson here that just because the state takes over the economy doesn't mean it transforms human nature. It doesn't mean that it abolishes greed. It just redirects greed. You know, as Macaulay might say, if I might paraphrase him, wherever you throw the carrion, the raven's croak is loud. Wherever you fling the honey, the buzzing flies will crowd. Wherever down river garbage floats, the greedy pike you see, and wheresoever such lord is found, such client soon will be. Macaulay referred to the flies chasing the honey. Flies don't make honey, they take honey. Bees make honey. And that's the kind of difference we have. When the government runs the economy, you get rich by taking. When you have a free market economy, you get better off by making. Bees make honey through voluntary exchange, through pollination with plants, voluntary exchange of work for wages, product for payment, investment for interest. Millions of these voluntary exchanges are what make people better off. So instead of a state-controlled, crony capitalist economy, we want a free market economy with small government and big citizens that empower individuals to do what they want with their money. That's how we put an end to this kind of crony capitalism, put people back in charge of their money and their lives. Thank you very much.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Hamilton Centre.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. To be clear, all capitalism is crony capitalism. The question is, does the leader of the official opposition have the courage, Madam Speaker, does the leader of the official opposition have the courage to expand the scope of this study, to investigate all the pigs at the trough, including Deloitte, including Ernst & Young, including the conservative favorite PricewaterhouseCoopers, KPMG? Why stop at McKinsey when we can go for all of them, Madam Speaker? Does the leader of the official opposition have the courage to do that?
The honourable leader of the official opposition.
Yes. Is that clear? Yes. But let's be clear about something. The member believes in capitalism. He just believes that capital should be controlled by bureaucrats and politicians. Because he believes that you take the same human being out who's a CEO and move him over to make him a top bureaucrat or a top politician, suddenly he'll become an angel. So he believes in allocating a capital. He just wants it to be done by force of the state rather than the free enterprise and voluntary exchange of customers, workers, and entrepreneurs. He believes in the ultimate control, crony capitalism, which is controlled by the state and directed by people with power. That's what he believes.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Well, I find that answer to be very interesting, Madam Speaker, because it begs the question of why didn't the Conservatives bring forward a more holistic motion? I mean, if the Leader of the Opposition is genuine in the opposition motion today to be one that opens the books up, as he said, and looks at everything, why would he bring forward a motion that is centered on one specific company if it wasn't for anything other than political gain?
Here, I just want to remind members that I'm sure that the Leader of the official opposition is able to answer the questions without any help from the colleagues. And so I would ask members to please hold on to their thoughts. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary can finish his question.
So he admits that he wants to open this up, but yet his motion is specific on one particular company. So the question is, was the Opposition Day motion motivated from a genuine interest in looking into an issue, or was it motivated for political gain where the Leader of the Opposition and Conservatives think they can drum up an issue to exploit fears and anxieties within people?
The Honourable Leader of the official opposition.
The former. It was a desire to look into the issue. But we also know how to set priorities, and we need to, because when you're examining Liberal wrongdoing and corruption, it's like drinking from a fire hose, right? So you have to start. The question we always ask is, where do you start? Where do you start? So we started with McKinsey, because that's where most of the smoke is, and that's where we're likely to find the first flame. But we are prepared to examine all of the $15 billion plus of massive high-price contracting out that this government does, and I can tell you we will cut that waste when I'm Prime Minister.
Questions et commentaires? L'honorable député de Beauport.
The Honourable Member for Beauport-Limoilou. Thank you, Madam Speaker. If my colleagues watched OCO recently, they will know that a motion was tabled to study all documents having to do with consultants from 2011 to the present. And that motion, we should see what its fate is next week. My question is the following. We know that the population is aging, and this is something that affects all professions. But from the beginning of the study on McKinsey, it's been remarkable to see how no one seems to want to talk about this topic. No one seems to have seen anything. No one seems to have heard anything. When it comes to these contracts, I'd like to hear from my colleague on this. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Well, the Conservatives want to investigate McKinsey, but we're also completely ready to investigate all contracts about businesses that received enormous sums. We're talking about $15 or more billion. We're ready to work with anyone in order to cast light on all of these contracts. We don't want Canadians to work hard just so that they can end up sending checks to people who are ultimately charging taxpayers $1,500 an hour.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Calgary-Midnapore.